so the story behind this is the first country I ever loved was Cuba. And I spent my entire time in grad school writing about Cuba. I was obsessed with it. And finally had to kind of back off and let it go because I felt like the book project I was working on just wasn't, I was never gonna sort of get my arms around it. And so I completely turned away from Cuba and started going on these other trips and kind of fashioned myself into a travel writer and got very curious and fascinated by foreign countries, but sort of never allowed myself to go in that deep to another place and completely give myself over to it because I felt like, in a way, I had too much to say about Cuba and I set myself up for an impossible creative process. And I didn't even read the news about Cuba because it was like too intense. I had to like completely abandon it. And this past spring, for a number of reasons, I just really felt like I had to go back. And it was the scariest trip I had ever taken. I mean, I've been to post-conflict countries. I've moved to Cairo. I've been to places that are, I guess, more scary. But going back and having to face the possibility of getting re-obsessed with Cuba 10 years after I first lived there, and to get bogged down in the same, like, unwritable book was so scary, but I really felt like I just had to do it. And folks, I'm on page 1, and this is it. This is literally, like, page 1.
Can I ask one question? Is this, when you did that 10 years later, is it the same project, or did it evolve into a different project?
Well, I think what the project is going to be the story of a return journey to hallowed ground. So it's going to be like just a 5-day structure, and this will be maybe, who knows, this will maybe be the preface. But I'm so scared of this, I don't even tell anyone in my life that I'm working on it. Like if people ask me if I have a book project, I say, of course, we all play around with long things. Because I feel like I burned myself for years by, trying too hard when I was like 24 years old to write a book, and I needed to like back off. But we all have to try again, right? Okay, here it goes, untitled. For years we had only the phone calls. I'd plug in all 13 digits, listen for those high-tone Game Boy rings, and wait long enough to imagine wires tunneling under ocean, cords wrapping around pale walls, until someone picked up a rotary phone at a nursing home in Cuba. "Soy la americana," I'd say, cringing at my stale accent, raising my voice regardless. It felt always like I was shouting down a long pipe. "And I'm calling for Luisito." Years had passed. Did they know our story? Tell it still. It felt silly to assume so, but I knew how things were. If anything delighted Cubans more than a love story, it was a wisecrack. Luisito and I were both a platonic romance and a favorite joke. It all began the day I showed up in Bejucal, a tiny town 60 miles outside of Havana, to volunteer. Nobody knew what this meant, volunteerism, in a land where labor was essentially free, and a foreign guest pitching in was more awkward than helpful, but no one was going to turn me away either, certainly not the nuns who mistook me for an aspiring sister and made sure I came that very first day to Sunday Mass. Luisito was there in the side aisle, many pews ahead, and I can still picture him propped up on the armrest of his wheelchair, a little ball of a man, staring right over the heads of the faithful, right at the strange, flushed person everyone was calling Americana. Luisito's eyes were big and brown and crooked. They took turns focusing, one darting to the corner while the other stared straight and hard. His face had a man's features, long nose, large ears, grays speckling through his buzz-cut black hair. But from the shoulders downward, Luisito dwindled. His torso looked cramped, hard-packed like a snowball, a thing about to burst. On one side, the collarbone pressed up his t-shirt, like he'd gotten dressed without ditching the hanger first. As for his legs, they were 2 skinny lines, barely reaching the wheelchair footrests. I had to look away, a quick flinch, when I caught him staring at me mid-homily. Luisito took adjusting. Never in my life had I come across a person with these proportions, these total asymmetries, and I simply didn't know what he was, a young boy or a grown man, let alone how to gauge whether he was, as they say, all there. But it didn't take long to warm to Luisito. He knew what it took to warm up strangers. He knew how to circle around them, shy but persistent, peering and withdrawing, not unlike those off-kilter eyes. By the time we meandered out of the church's dim nave into a noon-blasted light, Luisito was lending me his man-sized hand. I remember feeling his long fingers in mine, feeling squeamish, and very soon after, feeling just fine. By night, he'd given me his toy bumblebee, told me where to squeeze it. The next day, I was allowed to turn in his wheelchair, a warm frown I accepted, as he clambered around on the floor, showing off, laughing, until his ball of a body shook. A few more days and Luisito was demanding piggybacks. A few piggybacks, and I was used to the way his ribs dug into my low back. By the week's end, he looked crushed if I didn't find him during a blackout and share the bright glow of my modern laptop. Luisito liked me, I gathered. He was also, I discovered, afraid of the dark. None of this, our games, our palling around, the ever sillier ways we whiled away the long afternoons in a 3-storied complex of convalescing old ladies and wrinkled men, prepared me for the fact that Luisito, the pet of the nuns, the darling of this entire town, was 46 years old. No way, I said to Anya, the Cuban woman who mentioned his age, rejecting it outright. There's no way he's 46. 46 wasn't just a number, it was a loaded one in Cuba. You couldn't go 2 miles down the island's highways without a reminder from the billboards that it was the 46th year of the revolution. Everyone knew what was happening here, what Cuba was on the brink of 4 decades and 6 years ago. 4 decades and 6 years ago, Cuba was a playground for the New York Mafia, a quick ferry ride from Key West. 4 decades and 6 years ago, a tall law student was giving fiery speeches in the courtyards of the University of Havana, haranguing a regime that let wealth stay in the hands of the fair-skinned elite. 4 decades and 6 years ago, this rabble-rouser was about to grow a beard, don green fatigues, taped to the mountains, and launch the war that both transformed and isolated Cuba for the next half-century. A child of the revolution, that's what people call Luisito. Just as the rebels descended from the mountains, setting Havana ablaze with celebration, just as the wealthy rushed aboard planes from Miami, leaving servants to spread out in parlors and powder rooms, just as literacy volunteers swept the countryside, teaching peasants to read, right as the impossible dream of so many mid-century revolutionaries around the world was getting underway on this island, a baby was left with an unsigned note outside a Havana convent. So many things fascinated me about Luisito. The way he squirreled away toys like a boy, yet whined about television static like a middle-aged grump. That he could charm anyone, but women especially, bending the wills and rules of even the stern nuns. That men took best to Luisito the Joker, smirking whenever he claimed in that pipsqueak voice that he was sick of this crap, leaving for Miami tomorrow. How everyone in Bejucal looked ready to piss themselves when Luisito announced he was off to America in my suitcase. And of course, whether Luisito really believed he could emigrate, and because he seemed to, what exactly he imagined in the promised land due north, beyond couches and television remotes and hamburgers without limit. But more than anything, it was the span of his life, the perfect overlap of Luisito and revolution that enthralled me. Given that he was left to the public, just as everything else, land, schools, sugar, went public, it was hard to imagine a purer product of Cuba's revolution than Luisito Grau de Armas. He seemed like one of those people, one of those characters on whom you could read the full story of the place, in all its complexity, in all its glory. Or so it seemed whenever I stole away to my convent loft and stared at a blank page. I wasn't in Cuba to become a nun, and the volunteering was half-hearted at best, especially once I met Luisito. I whiled away those humid days spoon-feeding and wheeling old ladies into hibiscus vine patios, because volunteering was a way to be here, to witness this world. But through it all, constantly I longed to get back to my notebook. My body felt swollen with that longing. The force of this island almost hurt. It was the 46th year of the revolution, of a revolution I couldn't imagine lasting much longer, and before anything crumbled, before the hoary rebels faded away, before the flags changed, and the billboards quit keeping count, I yearned with quiet ferocity to write it all. So that is the first part of what I hope will just be a 3-part introduction before I'm actually on a plane going back to this place. And part of the reason I felt like I had to go back was because I felt so lucky that every time I called Bejucal, I got Luisito on the phone. sort of waited out these long pauses. And I heard that he was still alive and he could talk to me, and I was inevitably bawling, and I felt like just lucky in the kind of way I felt like